friends, welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws Podcast with East Forest. I'm Mr. East Forest. Thank you so much for joining us. This week I have a conversation with Shelby Hartman. She is the person who is the co-founder and editor-in-chief of DoubleBlind. You know DoubleBlind? It's a lovely magazine, but it's also a website and a platform that offers all sorts of information and experiences. As a matter of fact, I recently played a festival that they produced. So real world things like that too. All about the psychedelic landscape. But she's worked as a journalist for many years and has her hands and her interests and her heart in all of these different aspects, much like myself, of this field. So I knew it would be a rich conversation to get into this space, and I'm sure that you will enjoy it. So, touring. Some changes afoot. As I record this, I'm still not quite ready to say exactly what they are, but basically it's looking like we have to shift the November Europe dates, and those dates will now be in the United States, meaning I will come to Europe in 2023 is my hope, and we will be doing a ceremony concert tour on the western part of the United States, roughly November 1st through about the 20th. So go to eastforest.org for all the details on that. And I really thank people for their flexibility and their support. And I apologize for any inconveniences, but I'm very much looking forward to making these shows the best that they can be and the richest experience for everyone and the most sustainable for myself and for you and hopefully for the world too. So again, lots of details coming out about that in real time. I just wanted to get you all out there in the podcast sphere and our audience to know about it first. And speaking about knowing about things first, that's what people get on the council on Patreon. They support this podcast through patreon.com/eastforest, and I get to tell them about some of these things like I just did even earlier, or share music and things that come out before they're out, or demos, things like that. We have a monthly Zoom council because I just released a new record on Calm, the Calm app, and the record is called Headwaters. And I'll tell you more about that in a few weeks when it releases on Spotify and Apple and stuff like that. But I released that over on our council on Patreon. So those folks got to hear it now. So if you want to hear the Headwaters record now, go over to patreon.com/eastforest if you're not on Calm, and you can hear it there. It's a really beautiful record. I'm looking forward to telling you about how it came to be, because that's the story in itself of how it emerged was it was unusual and new for me, and new is special. And we do still have just a couple spots left at Esalen, December 9th through 12th. So again, eastforest.org, hit the tour tab, and you can scroll down and see if that is right for you. I'm still recovering a bit from COVID. You might hear it in my voice and certainly my energy levels. I'm really doing my best. But the past few days, I've been getting some work done here in the studio, and that's actually felt really good to flex that creative muscle a little bit. There's no better vitamin than just a bit of creativity. And I just feel really grateful, like when my body is in a place that I can do it, or that we can do anything, right? When we have our health. But I just recognize it's a kind of exercise, and I'm just grateful when I'm able to do it. And it's like I can honor that ability to be able to do it by then stepping up to the plate and playing, essentially, allowing something to flow through. It's something we can all do. You could just always, we could all free write or something. That's a great way to let divinity flow through. It's just like turning on the faucet and the tap, keeping the pipes running, lubricating the engine. Our role is just to kind of put pen to paper, so to speak, and it's available to all of us. All right, friends, thanks again for listening and for the support. You can always also just say hello at East Forest on Instagram, or East Forest Music, Facebook, or, the other platforms, or just, email, or in the psychic space. We're always available in your dreams. If you want to meet up somewhere in that liminal zone, just send us a dreamgram, and we'll be sure to reply in a timely manner. All right, let's get into this conversation with our friend, Shelby Hartman. Hi, Shelby. Nice to see you. I guess last time we saw each other was at your festival, but now this will give us a little more time to dive into some ideas and subjects. How you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, as I mentioned, I'm a little ill, but I'm feeling good. I took some aspirin and I've had some coffee, so I've got a window here that I'm going to be able to be totally present. Yeah, I wanted to talk because there's this intersection of worlds happening in the psychedelic space, and your magazine DoubleBlind and the work you're doing with that, I feel is at the center of a lot of it. And there's so much going on in this space. I'm just kind of curious about some of those aspects. But maybe we could just start with a little bit about who you are, and then we could also just fill in a little bit about what DoubleBlind is and how that came to be, and that'll give us a nice launching pad.
Sure. Yeah. Um, I'm a woman. I'm a Jew. I'm a journalist. I'm a
Yep.
musician, although a lot of people don't know that.
Oh yeah,
And
what do you
I'm
play?
also I play piano. I play a little bit of ukulele. I write music. I'm a jazz singer,
Oh wow. Okay.
and I also am the founder of DoubleBlind.
Hey, turn that gain knob a little bit down, just a little bit more.
How's that?
Yeah, great. How long's DoubleBlind been around?
I had the idea in November of 2018, and then we put the first magazine into the world in June of 2019.
Yeah, I don't know if I told you this, but I bought the first one as a gift. It was like a Christmas gift for Rada. So I mean, I've definitely it was on my radar, and I've been tracking it. So early fan over here.
That's amazing because, I mean, when our first issue came out, we didn't have a very big following because
I
it was our first issue.
Well, it's what I mean, you guys cover what I'm into, so I was like, this is cool. It's like it was kind of the first of its kind, and it reminded me of my early days in New York City. I was there around 2001, and I used to go down one block up the street. There's this clothing shop that gave away free copies of Vice magazine, and I was all about it way back when. And it had a similar energy that I don't know, it's nostalgic for me. But it was like about this new era and new time. So that's why it hooked me in.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I have to credit my college best friend David for the aesthetic. He lives in Bushwick. And so it would make sense that you would kind of see parallels between the early Vice days and the first issue of DoubleBlind.
Yeah. Yeah. So personally though, like how did you get into this space and why did you think you wanted to start a print magazine, which is not something that a lot of people do these days? Like there has to be a fire there for you to say like this is, you really want to do this.
Yeah, I don't often have moments where I receive, I guess the word I could use is download, although I feel like that word has been co-opted, where the step that I need to take is crystal clear and visceral. It's not intellectual at all. It's just, it really is sort of like a revelatory, this is what needs to happen moment. And I
Yeah.
remember having two moments in my life that informed largely where I'm at professionally now. And one moment was when I was reporting a story for Quartz on psychedelics and mysticism. And I was researching sort of the origins of the mystical questionnaire, which we can get into later, but it's a questionnaire that they use in clinical trials to determine the mysticism of psychedelic
Totally.
experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember, like, in the middle of doing this research, just having this moment of, oh my God, like, this is so interesting and this is so important and this is what I should be doing and this is what I should be writing about. And then I had a similar experience when I was meditating at the end of 2018 in my apartment in New Orleans, where all of a sudden I just had this idea to start a magazine on psychedelics. And again, it wasn't like, oh yeah, Denver's about to decriminalize psilocybin and look at all the research and look at Michael Pollan's book. Like, there was no sort of, intentional calculus in that way. It was just, I want to start a print magazine on psychedelics. And from there, it really blossomed organically.
Yeah, same for me, by the way, with like at least the Music from Mushrooms album. It came out 2 weeks after Oakland and right after what was the other one? Denver.
Denver.
And everyone said the same thing, like, "Oh, great timing." I'm like, well, I started this a year ago, and this is just when it came out. I mean, it's more like there's a collective field. Sometimes we find that you look in human history and certain things are discovered at the same time, or cultures develop certain techniques at the same time, or even an art in some ways. And the initial thought is like, well, they clearly were talking to each other, but some of them weren't. It's sort of almost baked into a timeline of our evolution. And I wonder at times, of course, so DoubleBlind, a piece of media and everything on the internet, yes, we are all in this great conversation. But perhaps concurrently there's a kind of inevitability where it's like this is happening now and it would have anyway. What do you think about
Do
that?
you believe that? Well, I was just going to ask you what you think about that.
Well, I think it's a both and. I think historically we would say that some things do seem to naturally emerge, but we're obviously midwifing it through technology and information being able to be spread so easily, which is good and bad. I mean, you talk about on the DoubleBlind's website about how these conversations can go a bit sideways and or research can become biased so easily, especially in this space because we want it so badly, in a way. How do you keep the North Star of objectivity?
Well, I think objectivity is an illusion, especially within the context of journalism. And I think that especially became clear sort of in the wake of former President Trump being elected and what happened to a lot of the quote unquote liberal media that were covering the race. So for me, the goal isn't objectivity, but it is about keeping my quote cognitive bias in check. And what I mean by that is that, like you said, we all have beliefs that we want to reaffirm. And we move through the world looking for opportunities to reaffirm these pre-existing beliefs. And so as a journalist, I often try and heed the advice of a mentor of mine from Columbia Journalism School named Nick Lemon, who says, read your work like your enemy would. And essentially read through the article and look for every single opportunity to challenge yourself and to ask yourself, what would someone else who is intelligent, who has a varying perspective, have to say about this? I don't think that every single perspective can or should be included in every article always.
Right.
For example, if I'm doing a story on how ayahuasca has helped a transgender person come into their own body, I don't think it's my responsibility to go interview someone who's homophobic about the fact that, transgenderism doesn't exist. Like that's not, I don't think that that's my responsibility, but I do think that within reason, it's my responsibility to go out and seek legitimate, informed, varying perspectives. And a good example of that would be in our reporting on what's happening in the realm of psychedelic drug development. Because for me, I'm sort of inherently anti-capitalist. I think that the system that we live in is problematic and oppresses people. But at the same time, I've interviewed some really interesting researchers at for-profit psychedelic drug development companies who have made the argument that the FDA approval process, which, it requires about $90 million to get a drug to market in the United States,
at least,
is it's a necessary evil because, for a lot of reasons that we could get into, but it's, there are arguments there besides just, I want to capitalize upon earth medicines and get really rich.
Yeah, there's the safety angle, which is not, it's true. Like we should be doing checks, and we do have millions and millions of people. That's a complicated thing, putting any substance into a human body and trying to see what it does. It's never a perfect process. But yeah, I like this idea, though, of objectivity and that notion that we always have our bias. And so there's an element of choice really, it comes down to there's an artifice that's honorable. It's like you have to choose to try and look for that balance. But you know what? I also do you find that in journalism, or maybe popular journalism, quote unquote, that there's this tendency to feel like, oh, I have to be balanced in a way that is contrary just for the sake of journalism? Like, I mean, I'm thinking about someone did a piece on me, and they were like, for this company, and they were like, we'd like to come do the piece. It's like, sure. I said, I don't have much time, so we squeezed it in like the morning after the performance, and at the last minute they actually forgot to get tickets to the show or something, so we gave them tickets, and it was all like buddy, and like just being, he's cool, I'm cool, just being nice, you know. And I read the piece, and it was sort of like snarky, and didn't want to give up any of like, well, I actually like this music, I'm actually a fan. It was the opposite, almost, not want to say a takedown, but a bit of just like snarky. And I was like, yeah. And I thought to myself, that seems so unnecessary. Like, you could still write the entire piece about my work and have no opinion about it, and you don't need to be cool. So like, I'm going to be a cool like journalist. I'm like, it just seems transparent to me, because like the whole time you're being so like, we're best friends, and I'm just trying to help you out. Do you feel that's a thing, like a meme?
Yeah, I do feel it's a thing, and I think for me as the editor, the question would be, what kind of piece is this? Is it a reported piece? Because if it's portraying itself as a reported article, then the idea, at least sort of from a journalism 101 ethics standpoint, would be to interview a variety of perspectives and to do your best to keep your own perspective as the writer out of it. If it's an opinion piece, you're free to say whatever you like. It's your opinion.
Right. Yeah, I guess so. But I guess what I'm speaking to is that there's almost like a stylistic tendency these days that is considered cool. And it's like, but it seems like it's more about the writer than the subject. Forget about the thing that just happened to me. I see it all the time. Like, it's like, especially about psychedelics, actually. You know, people write pieces, and it's like they have to put in the takedown. Like, almost like it's not actually scientific. It'll just be like, but it's not a party like it used to be. Or it's like, you know, and here, you know, they always throw something in almost like a saving grace to cover their ass with the normies. And it's like, you don't need to. You could still just report about it, and that would be enough. Let people make up their own mind.
Right. Yeah, I agree. The facts should speak for themselves in a sort of quote unquote objectively reported story. But people like to be contrarian in general. There's this idea, right, that like as soon as a musician becomes, you know, well known enough that all of a sudden you don't want to listen to them anymore because they're not underground.
Yeah, exactly. It's not punk
rock. Don't become too famous. You won't be cool anymore.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm working hard on not being too famous. Yeah. I mean, that's what you think by picking 15 years ago. I was like, I'll make music for mushroom ceremonies. Believe me, that was not a safe bet for like, this will be heard by anyone on this planet. So I'm as amazed as you are that there's people out there listening. But that goes back to this idea of inevitability, of cultural inevitabilities, and how maybe we're in service to them without even realizing it. You know, perhaps I'm just a tool like everybody else that's being used. Our job is to follow our excitement, just like you starting the magazine. It's like an idea that came out of wherever in service to this larger unfolding.
I like to believe that. I would say, and this sort of addresses your question earlier as well about, can't remember how you phrased it, something about collective consciousness and, you know, are we all a part of this greater sort of vision or movement towards something, even if we don't realize it? I would say that for me, I've always sort of had one world in the data, cerebral, skeptical science realm, and one foot in the mystical, visceral, intuitive, metaphysical realm. I majored in philosophy. I have obviously had a lot of, I don't want to say obviously, but I've had a lot of profound psychedelic experiences, particularly on ayahuasca, where it has felt deeply true that there is so much that humans cannot and do not access on a daily basis, and that we may never be able to fully understand. Simultaneously, my background is in journalism, and in this culture, we do revere a particular type of knowledge or data, and it's my responsibility to be critical. And so I'm always trying to balance those things.
Do you see DoubleBlind as a bridge, in a sense, from the mystical to the Muggles, or what is your intention, or in that way, or is there one?
I mean, there's several different intentions behind DoubleBlind, but if I had to simplify it, it would be giving people the tools that they need to heal and encouraging them to live the fullest lives possible through exposure to ideas.
Yeah. Well, I share that as well, and if I were to take that to the next step, this is something I've been thinking about a lot over the last couple of years, and I wrote about this in the piece, is about that inner inquiry and how important it is, and how change really emanates from the inside out. I don't see how it ever happens any other way. It just becomes collective people coming together. But do you believe that it naturally formulates into others, to us, to serve us in a sense, if that process is true, if it is real? I do. That's my belief in what human nature really is that when we feel safe and we really start to dive inside, there's a natural realization of interconnectivity, interdependence, and therefore, I've witnessed it in people where, as they start to quote unquote wake up, they want to help, or they want to be purposeful to all that is, which includes all beings. Not everyone believes that, or they can be short-circuited, where it's a little more spiritual bypassy, where people get in these loops of just diving in, and self-aggrandizement, and so that's where you need actually community and others to say, "Hey, I think you're short-circuiting here. I think you're full of shit. Like, you need to go a little this way, or put down the medicine cup for a little bit, and start to take the curriculum of Earth." What do you feel about that?
Well, you can't make someone believe something they don't believe, but once you experience it, you'll believe it. And
Right.
Everyone on Earth wants to experience less suffering. I mean, Buddha talked about that. Every single ancient mystic and philosopher for time immemorial has talked about that humans ultimately are seeking pleasure and seeking to avoid suffering. And so even if a person doesn't believe that healing themselves is going to cause an outward ripple effect in which they will realize their connectivity to other beings and to the earth, and thus become a more conscientious global citizen, they have an incentive to walk the healing path. And if they do, eventually they will start to experience those things.
Man, incentivizing it. Like, yeah, how do you think we incentivize it beyond, like, what is the incentive for the average person? Because look, I think we both know, like, those ayahuasca journeys you've talked about, and thank you for sharing that personal experience. Those are hard work, like, yeah, they can be amazing, but it's also like, it takes some bravery and courage and hard work. And so where is the incentive for the person who hasn't stepped into these spaces that maybe it would be good for them? Because it's not for everybody, but for those that it might be.
It's really hard. It's a question that I ask myself all of the time. I've been thinking about it a lot lately, particularly in regards to alcohol, because there's some people who are close to me who have gone into AA, and I've seen their entire lives change because of it. Wow. At the same time, because of DoubleBlind, a lot of people send me beautiful products like herbal teas and mushroom capsules and all kinds of stuff. And they're really expensive. And something that I always come back to is, Like who can afford to spend $90 on a bottle of mushroom capsules? Well, maybe you could afford it if you weren't trying to escape your own suffering by spending a lot of money on booze. So it's just this, like I was saying, I think that it all comes back to people are trying to escape their suffering. You can do that through embarking on a journey that allows you to heal and to sustainably create an inner state that is actually going to give you what you're looking for, or you can continually try to escape your suffering through numbing yourself and through instant gratification. And so how do we educate people and show them that these short-term solutions are actually just perpetuating what they're trying to escape? And I think that oftentimes, for me anyway, it comes down to, again, like kind of a visceral knowing rather than an intellectual understanding. And we published a piece in the first issue of DoubleBlind called The Function of Awe. And it was written by this reporter named Zachary Slobig, who's asking this question, okay, everybody knows we're in the midst of a climate crisis. Why is nobody doing anything about it? And his argument is that in order for people to be inspired to actually change their day-to-day behaviors, they need to have an experience of awe in nature. They need to actually viscerally feel the value of this earth. And I think something similar needs to happen in the realm of personal healing as well, that you can't just tell someone, hey, stop drinking, you're going to feel better. Or, we have to find a way to actually give people sort of an embodied experience of what this is, a taste of it, so that they want to keep going. And for me, that's where trying to create accessible journeys comes in. And I know that that's a big motive for you behind your music is, you hope that some people come to your concert just to hear you play, and then they actually have an experience that transforms them in some way or gives them some window of insight into what a healing path might look like for them. And at DoubleBlind, we think about the same thing. So we obviously began with content, which is content, quote unquote, journalism, which is cerebral. But now we're doing these sort of what we're calling DoubleBlind journeys, which are basically just experiences virtually that you can have at home, cannabis ceremonies, breath work, somatic integration with some of the most powerful people in our network. You don't have to go anywhere. You can do it from your house. You don't need access to drugs. And, in the hopes that, even just engaging in 90 minutes of breath work from your own bedroom is going to give you a glimpse into what this path might look like.
Yeah, absolutely. Felt experiences is it's really everything, because you can't argue with it. It's your experience. It's not something anyone's trying to convince you of, or there's no dogma. It's yours. That's 100% why I ended up on my path way back when from a psilocybin experience in college. That was just an experience I had that literally blew my mind and heart. And I was just like, oh my God, there's more. And it set me on a path of, what is this? Where I had no teachers or anyone to say, go this way, or this is what that might have been. And, I'm still on that path. But I agree with you that giving people opportunities and tools for that inspiration to find it on the inside is probably the only way. Journey space, same idea, like accessibility, and I'm focused on the music, like through music in these different experiences. It's almost like a Trojan horse in a way. It's like things that are so common for us, like music. And it's like, well, if you just put this little angle on it, a little tweak, like, a little more time or whatever it is, or intentionality, perhaps that's the doorway for you. But I agree that and there's something too about the group experience that we've known for a long time with like concerts and things, but kind of we were experimenting a bit with that at the festival. It was I never said it out loud. How do you pronounce the festival?
Oh my gosh! Don't even get me going on how that name came about. And we jokingly no one knows.
What was it?
Your guess is as good as ours.
Mycologia.
Mycologia. We jokingly on the DoubleBlind team call it Mycologia.
It's a lot of syllables. Yeah.
Sorry, my computer. The charger.
Power?
I need to hang on a second.
Sure thing. Mycologia. That was the DoubleBlind festival in just north of LA, a couple hours, that Numinous was the sponsor of, that I did a performance at, I don't know, a couple months ago.
There we go.
You're back.
I'm back.
Well, what I was trying to say is like having opportunities for people to do that in the group experience is even another level of cohesion, like having that internal awareness and felt experience and like, oh my God, it's not just me. Like, I mean, there's nothing I love more than doing those things. And then you have some kind of sharing circle the next day or something. And people start reporting like these shared, like, oh my God, everyone's thing was about ancestors essentially, or everyone's thing was about, there's these connective tissues of like the shared dream in a way. Is that something that you are perhaps going to do more of, or is that a priority for DoubleBlind? Is these events beyond digital offerings?
I mean, I would love to do events. I thought that the festival was really beautiful. It was such a great opportunity to meet our community in person. At the end of the day, I think being in person with people is just where it's at. But, events are expensive and they're really hard to do. And I mean, your set is the perfect example of that, right? Like we worked so hard to get everything right for that. And then the power just went out in the teepee. What are we going to do? We're in the middle of the desert.
At least it was at the end. I mean, in some ways when it's force majeure like that, you're like, well, I guess that's the end. It wasn't like I played for 10 minutes. I probably played for almost 2 hours or hour and a half.
Right.
But you're right. Like when that happens, it happens. If it makes you feel any better, that's happened at festivals and things, where you think it shouldn't, and it does. So
that does make me feel better. I was like, oh my God, they must think we're so unprofessional. But it wasn't our fault that the power went out. Apparently that's never happened at the venue before.
Really? Well, then it definitely is like, okay, that's the time. I mean, it wasn't like I was like going to push through. I definitely took it as a sign. I think I was playing the flute when it happened, which is not amplified. So I was like, well, okay, I'll just play the flute some more and this will be our closing. So there you go. The mushrooms have decided this is the end. So was that a good event for you personally? Or was that was a lot to put on?
No, it was a really amazing event. The first day I was pretty stressed out. There's no cell phone service really at the campground. So they give you these walkie-talkies and it's a huge space. It's like, I don't know how big it is, but it was like I'd be over in the trailers, like trying to make sure so-and-so had whatever. And then I'd get on the walkie. Oh, Krishna's arrived. He's at the dome.
The other side.
Walk. Hey, Shelby, over. Someone's at the check-in for you. DJ named Mark DeClivelo. Where is he sleeping tonight? I'm like, oh, walk back
Get
over.
The steps in.
And then and then I think it was around Friday afternoon, I stepped into the trailer where I was sleeping for a minute, and I put down the walkie, and I was like, am I allowed to curse on your podcast?
You can cuss. Yeah.
Okay. I was like, fuck it. I'm so done with this thing. Smoked a joint, jumped in the pool. I was like, I'm over it.
That's the breakthrough moment, actually, when you finally arrived. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was great. I remember it was also very hot too out there at that time, and so that probably didn't make it too easy. But it is great for people to be able to get together. It's sort of the same idea I'm trying to do with like the ceremony concerts. It's sort of like that group experience. It's especially after COVID, and especially it's in a lot of ways it's the antidote to our digitized lives. These little avatars we run, our little PR campaigns on social media. So it's really useful. You're just bringing like a little level of intentionality to an event like that, whereas maybe you go to some concerts and it's a little more passive. It's like, well, we're all just kind of here, and we might stumble into transcendence, and we all hope to, but we're not kind of collectively agreeing. from the outset that maybe that's a goal, or it's about
Right.
the others and like, being in a circle, those sorts of things.
Right. I think for me, I'm especially interested in creating spaces where everyone feels welcome and where you can truly show up as you are. I mean, I know that if you go on DoubleBlind's Instagram or something, I don't know, we have like I think we have an aesthetic that's very sort of this moment. And,
Totally.
you might assume that our primary demographic of readers is millennials because we're millennials. It sounds annoying to say, even as I say it out loud, but actually we have an extremely diverse readership in terms of age, location, all the things. And my favorite thing about the festival was seeing like, a couple in their 60s from, some, state that, like in the Midwest, who has never camped before, but they just love DoubleBlind, and they're like like in their they're like fully decked out in their REI gear, like ready to camp, eating around the fire with, some people who go to every single, some younger folks who go to every single festival, from Coachella to Lollapalooza. It doesn't matter who you are. All that matters is that you're just there to connect with other people and that you're kind. And those
Yeah.
are the kinds of experiences that I want to create.
Totally. Yeah. Well, what do you think is the edge of this renaissance? Do you think it's about access? Do you think it's about what?
What do you mean by edge?
Like maybe before it was legality, for instance. It's like that's sort of like the spear tip of this renaissance in the psychedelic world. And so I'm not necessarily asking what it is, but what you want it to be, or what you hope it is, or what you think it is, or the things like the work that needs to be done, and that's like the leading edge of it.
Yeah, I was talking to some friends about this last night because we were talking about how, first it was cannabis and now it's mushrooms and what comes after mushrooms. I think I'm most interested in this question of what comes after the trip. Like, great, okay, so you take the psychedelic, some crazy things happen to you, and then it's over, and then what? And I try not to over romanticize or idealize the potential of the psychedelic quote unquote renaissance. And what I mean by that is that it's tempting when you have a transformative psychedelic experience to want to stand on the rooftops and scream, psychedelics are going to save the world. Okay. Maybe they'll help, but it's not the end all be all. And something that Ismail Ali, who works with MAPS on policy, often speaks to eloquently is this idea that if people don't have their fundamental needs met, healthcare, shelter, food, community, all the psychedelics in the world aren't going to fix that.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I'm passionate about the potential of psychedelics to heal people and to, quote, wake them up. But I think I'm more passionate in encouraging people to think about what kind of ecosystem that they want psychedelics to be a part of, because it's not about the psychedelic.
Absolutely. I mean, when I play a ceremony concert, I don't think I really speak about psychedelics. We're talking about how you engage with the world. A plant medicine experience is just one of many experiences that we have that, the human experience can be quite rich itself. And we all know that, especially like divorces, bankruptcies, near-death experiences, health scares, traumas, all these things are grist for the mill to really help us evolve. That's why we're here, in my opinion. So a psychedelic is just another one to help you along. And it should translate. I still think it naturally does. If you're really doing the work, you will naturally want to be more connected to others and help other people. You'll realize that it's the same thing. That actually, like, a lot of the pain comes from your sense of separateness. And that's reinforced by most things in our world. But when you work in the opposing polarity, you actually recognize how it's like, oh, these teachings have been around for a long time. Like, by engendering certain feelings in someone else, I'm doing it to myself too. And like, oh, like their bliss is my bliss. And you're right. Like, that's why then I would hope you would be working to rebalance the inequities that exist, because you do need to have your housing situated, and people like that middle zone is where most of the happiness is. It's not in the billionaire class, and it's unfortunately, well, for some people, abject poverty works for them, but it's not good, and there's a lot of suffering there, and the life is not easy. But the point is that, like, there's no reason why we should have anyone homeless or houseless in this country. There's no reason why anyone should not be able to get medical care in this country. These things should just, and maybe even a basic income. It's like, I believe, why not? And if they want to earn more, go earn more. But it's like, we have the resources, and it's sad that we can't even just take care of those things and then start to offer services, perhaps like psychedelic therapy, in different ways that people can then start to work on the traumas and pains that exist. We don't have a lot of time to just keep on keeping on. So I think one of the hopes with psychedelics is that it's mostly, to me, about healing traumas, because there's so much trauma that people are carrying from generations and generations and generations. And I've seen it just in Radha's ketamine clinic, how effective it can be to move some of these things forward that have been stuck for a very, very long time, in a very embodied way, how it's in the body, not so much up here in the head.
Yeah. I guess getting more specific about your question regarding the edge of the psychedelic movement, I would say that, yes, I'm interested in encouraging people to think more broadly about what psychedelics might accomplish, or what we're really trying to do here, which is not just to trip out, but also in terms of psychedelics specifically, I would say that access, absolutely, and also what I often refer to as sort of a disruption of the hierarchy of set and setting. So we're not against FDA approval at DoubleBlind. We understand that it's important to prove the safety and efficacy of certain drugs, that some folks are never going to have an experience outside of sort of a clinical context that's been approved by their doctor, that some folks are going to want the ability to have these treatments covered by their insurance, et cetera, et cetera. But we also want to leave space for the ceremonial use of psychedelics and even the recreational use of psychedelics. And by that, I don't mean approaching these medicines without reverence or intention. I just mean to say that we want to disrupt this idea that this sort of false dichotomy that was put forth within cannabis, that you're either using cannabis recreationally or you're using it medically, when we actually know that in the real world that a psychedelic experience can encompass all of these qualities simultaneously. And something that's medical can also, and therapeutic, can also be ceremonial, can also be playful. That laughter, the cliche that laughter is medicine, that dancing, like, you want to go take MDMA and dance all night at a rave? Great. Go do it. Test your drugs first. Don't drink alcohol while you're on MDMA. But it's just to say that obviously a lot of mistakes were made in cannabis, and now we're in a situation where the regulations have shut out some of the early pioneers of the industry, and folks are even returning to what we call sort of the traditional market or the black market, because cannabis is so expensive to purchase from a dispensary. Because I can't even get like a bottle of CBD open because there's so many little freaking child-proof and the plastic and it's just absurd. And we don't want to see that happen in psychedelics too.
Yeah. Access combined with information and tools, really. It's like the freedom to choose, but then just giving people lots of support and information. We don't want it to be tied up, of course, in a medicalized model that's it and it's too expensive and it's completely sterilized. But I think, I mean, the decriminalization model goes that way a bit. But at the end of the day, that's why I'm putting out music that's a tool, or these experiences to teach sort of like the basics of sort of ceremony and intention and how to walk through these experiences, or journey space, or what you're talking about, what you're wanting to offer. But people are going to choose either way, so you might as well like take jail off the table. It's like that's ridiculous, and then give them things to use and information, and it just seems like that's the way to go. That's my prayer. It's a messy process, and you're right. Capitalism can get in there and muck it up, but we'll see. I'm a little hopeful with Oregon, in or at least their initial approach, but we'll see. We'll see. So, are you hopeful as Shelby? Like,
Oh, it's a big question. Let me think about it. I think that in my deepest moments of connectivity and alignment, I do feel that there's some kind of universal order to things, but it's easy to get disheartened.
mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems a lot of times the kryptonite to that despair is reading sacred texts, or reading an article in DoubleBlind, or listening to the right music, or getting into nature. It's a kind of remembering. It's a kind of reminding that is filling the cup back up from when you're spilling water out from the other polarity of consumption. You know, like bad news or like all the other stuff. It's almost like you have an energy bank, and it's once it's sort of you're using it up each day, and you practice essentially. You know, are the things that refill that cup. Like you said, felt experience. It's sometimes hard to remember in a lot of ways. Like if we go back to the basics of being a human, like just being with the cycles, like going to bed and waking up with the light, or just going outside, putting your hand in the dirt, these sorts of things, earthing, they actually help, because when you don't do it, you feel deficient. It's a kind of vitamin that you need to take. And it includes all the information that you bring in to yourself and who you surround yourself with.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work to stay in that place of alignment. And we held an integration circle at the beginning of COVID called Coming Back to Self with Deanna Rogers and Ito Cohen. I love them. They're resident facilitators at DoubleBlind. And they chose that title. And it's something I often think about, this idea of coming back to self and what is required to do that. I think it's foolhardy, at least for me, to believe that I'm always going to be in that place of alignment where I feel optimistic and I feel connected. But hopefully I can be there more and more.
You know, and we all feel that, right? Like that seems to be the journey, is to be in, to be out, to remember, to forget. And that's okay. I think when you can be witnessed through that process, that's the real love and the real joy. And to do that for others, I think the real pain comes from feeling like you're alone and you're doing that on your own. And it does take conscious work these days for most of us in the modern world to not just be an isolated digital individual. I mean, you can order things online, you can do all these things, but sometimes you're forgetting about the necessary energetic relationship and nourishment that comes from others.
So yesterday, as I mentioned, I was chatting with some friends about like what comes after shrooms. Like first there was cannabis, then there was shrooms, then what? And one of my friends said community and regenerative ways of living. And I wrote a piece for the Huffington Post a lot of years ago now, like 6 years ago, but it was headlined "Everything's a click away except the things that matter most." And it was talking about this idea of like, I mean, you can literally go on like an app and find someone to show up at your door who you don't know to have sex with you. Like everything's a click away. But is that the kind of sex you want to be having? No judgment if it is. I'm just saying the point is I'm being a little bit, absurd about this, but the point is, technology has amplified the culture that already existed of instant gratification, and it creates the illusion that we're getting the things that we want for ourselves, but ultimately just perpetuates where we already were. And I don't know. I really do hope we see some kind of like second wave back to the land movement or something. I think we already are, because to me, loneliness is, I don't know if I would say it's the biggest pandemic that we're in right now, but it's just so detrimental. I really think the way that humans are living now is extremely unnatural.
Yeah, loneliness as the pandemic. Well, again, you think about natural emergence, and in many ways, it's quite possible we will be forced back to the land. And if you look at it through that lens, and the mainstream idea with that is like, that's terrible. Like, that's collapse. We're running out of things. We have to get out of this and the cities and so forth. But like, what if that is the natural plan and this is all happening and the only way it can happen? Like, humans will never choose to dismantle certain systems and get rid of our conveniences. But when you're forced to, you might discover through the bitter medicine that it's the pathway forward of actually more peace, more connection, more joy. I don't wish any suffering on anyone. I'm just saying, what if? What if?
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting to look at COVID because it's something that I think most of us never could have conceived of before it happened. And a lot of people were forced inward as a result of COVID. But it seems like, I don't know, it seems like we didn't learn that much, to be honest. It seems like as soon as the world reopened, people were just kind of trying to get back to the way things were before. I don't know why I just keep having this image of like a guy standing in line at Costco with like an entire shopping cart full of toilet paper.
Yeah. Well, there's always the cosmic joke, like that toilet paper became the thing. But let's not discount that the power of the felt experience, as we were talking about. And, we went through that. And I also think it's just the beginning of a larger process through generations, and we're in it. And I do think there is change afoot. It just might not be how we think we're choosing it or want to choose it, but it's happening. And it's this COVID thing. It is happening. Like it is now. It's just part of our world. I mean, like you said, it was unthinkable, but we went through. We did it. We're unbelievably resilient as a people, and we're going to continue to face some very hard things. So I think more and more, it is about a kind of support and love for people, to trying to meet them where they're at, but also trying to encourage them with open doors. And for all of us, Shelby, I mean, just for me, for you, it's like no matter what we've gone through or quote unquote figured out, we have a lot more to figure out, and a lot more pain, and a lot more problems, and we stumble and we fall. It's like we just have to keep dreaming, holding that hope, or that against that despair, to say something is becoming. And yeah, it is hard. Yes. And how can we walk through that together? We don't necessarily have the answer, but we can take those steps together. I know it's a bit lofty, but at the end of the day, information and experiences and listening and healing, we have to just keep doing it. I don't know what else there is to do.
Yeah. I do my best to also try and put myself in other people's shoes and step out of my own bubble, because obviously I work in psychedelics. I'm surrounded by people who meditate and sit in ceremony. And it's always such a wake-up call for me, or an important reminder when I leave sort of like these hubs of new age spirituality, because a lot of folks just are trying to survive. I mean, I lived in New Orleans for almost a decade. Last time I was down there, I was taking an Uber from downtown New Orleans to my uncle's house. He lives uptown, and there was the driver was this woman who had been formerly incarcerated and abused while incarcerated. And when she got out, she started a nonprofit to help other formerly incarcerated women reintegrate into society. And we were just talking, and she was asking me what I do. And I said, yeah, I write about psychedelics. And she said, what do you mean? What do you mean psychedelics? What's a psychedelic? Wow. And I said, yeah. And I said, like, mushrooms, acid. She said, mushrooms, like the kind you get at the grocery store. I said, kind of, but again, it's just this deep reminder of, I think that a lot of us within the psychedelic community at this point would assume, oh yeah, a lot of people don't know about, maybe they've never heard of ayahuasca. Maybe they don't know about whatever, like some of the nuanced conversations we're having about things that are unfolding within the industry. But they've probably heard of Timothy Leary. They probably heard of acid, right? I mean, you'd be surprised.
Probably.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, it's keeping an open mind, and again, meeting people where they're at, because absolutely we can be in our own reality tunnel of a lot of people. It's like, man, they're like, I don't have time to learn or think about psychedelics. It's like, I'm just trying to like put food on a table, or deal with all sorts of things. I completely get that, and that's completely valid, and there are many paths to Rome, so to speak. So I never think that this is the answer for everything or everyone, although Tim Leary probably did at the time, but that's not my belief. I just think it's one modality that for some reason is swimming in my world, and it can be a powerful one. I mean, I've seen a lot of powerful change with people faster than you'd think it could happen, but not for everybody, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, what do you have coming up, or what are you excited about as we sort of round this conversation? What is there something you do want to share that we haven't shared in any regard, personal or with DoubleBlind?
Not really. I'm trying to think. I mean, I'm excited about DoubleBlind. I'm excited about where we're at. I'm really, really grateful for all the people on the team who are working so hard to make it a reality. We're coming out with a course on psychedelics and maternity this year, which we're halfway through filming, and I'm really stoked about that because we're featuring these 5 women who are moms who have been supporting other women and moms on their healing paths for a long time. And I was talking to Rada a little bit about this, that I think I'm in this phase right now with DoubleBlind of just really wanting to uplift and promote people who have done the work themselves, and who we consider to be just really practicing what they preach and supporting others through the muck of navigating their own consciousness. At psychedelic conferences, we often see a lot of the same kind of voices and faces over and over again. And it's not to say that those folks haven't done a lot of incredible work. We're very grateful to everyone who has been working to overturn psychedelic prohibition for decades. And of course, all the underground practitioners and indigenous communities who have stewarded these plants for thousands of years. I guess just where I'm at right now is I don't really care how many followers you have on Instagram or whether you've spoken at a psychedelic conference before. If you are doing the work and you can help other people do the work, I want to platform you. And so I'm really excited about this course. I know that psychedelics for moms or parents might be considered kind of a taboo topic. Again, like, I don't care. You know, there's a lot of moms out there who, you know, being a mom is hard. And there's a lot of moms out there who want to know, you know, if they can, you know, how they can make the space to journey and break cycles of trauma so that they don't pass those on to their children, and how they can become their own sort of healers while pregnant, while exploring the possibility of becoming pregnant. And the medical system isn't always supporting them. And so, you know, we're going to put out this information, and I hope it helps people. And some people might say, oh, you shouldn't be talking about that. That's fine. If we don't talk about it, who's going to help? Who's going to? Who's going to be providing this information? People, it's like drug education or sex education in schools. You can tell the kids not to have sex, but you know they're going to, or you can just give them condoms, you know? So I'm excited about that course. I'm excited to just platform, like, specifically, you know, women, queer folks, people of color who have smaller followings who are amazing. And obviously excited about issue 8 as well. And really stoked that you're contributing to it. So that should be out in December.
Yeah, I can't wait. Well, thank you for all the work that you do. And I really am grateful for the time you could give today. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much, Shelby, for coming on the show. It's always good to dig into the spaces, and we look forward to doing more of it. This song that you're hearing in the background, this is a bit of actually the last track from the Headwaters album that I mentioned is available to hear on the Calm app right now, or it is also available to hear on our Patreon, patreon.com/EastForest. This song is called Requiem. There's 4 songs on this EP. It's a 45-minute album, and they were all recorded live in a sort of concert ceremony focusing around a beautiful piano, this C. Bechstein piano down in southern Utah. So it's just a beautiful piano, and I created these soundscapes with it, and I can tell you more about that. But yeah, go listen to this record on one of those 2 platforms if you're interested in hearing it now. And thank you to everyone on our council on Patreon. Thank you for your support. Thank you for everything you do. And thank you again for your flexibility about these live shows. Check out the dates as they're being announced. eastforest.org/tour. We'd love to see you there while tickets are available and they last. All right, you keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit, but if you do, you know what to do. Do